All right, good Tuesday evening, everybody. It is January 20th, 2026, and we are talking winter weather. Not tonight, not tomorrow, not even Thursday, not even Friday. We're talking this weekend. Yeah, it's about 4 to 5 days out. Realistically, really 5 days for the worst to get here. But it's a strong enough signal that we've got to get you ready now, and we'll break down some of the things going on. But let's jump right into it because we've got cold air in place. The only weather we really have this week before the system gets here is going to be Thursday into Friday as the Arctic front arrives. There could be a little bit of rain with that. But we are weather impact alert for the weekend. Highest threats, heavy ice and snow. And I will emphasize the ice part. I have seen way too much emphasis on the snow part from apps to just people online. Folks, right now, this is not an all-snow event. Even in my coldest of coldest setup, there's at least some sleet mixing in at some points, which would reduce the snow total. So the crazy snow totals seem to be like way off the charts to me. So let's get into kind of the setup here because we can kind of see some of the ingredients coming together already for this, even though we're on Tuesday. The one area I'm watching, and this will be an area I'll watch over the next couple of days, will be over the deep south. This is where our low pressure system, you can kind of see it over the Pacific. There's a low pressure system out there that's going to come in the southern stream of the jet stream, and we'll probably see something start to crank up there. But what's ahead of it right now is an Arctic front. That's over the Midwest. You see that little batch of snow? That's the first of what could be 2 or 3 surges of Arctic air. And you're probably saying, Arctic air, it's pretty cold now. That's part of the reason we're so confident in winter weather. It's already cold, so this is even colder air. We would have winter threats right now, even if we didn't have that blast of cold air. And speaking of that, there is a ton of it up there. I mean, you look at that big swath of below zero readings, and that's what that aquamarine shade is. Those are below zero temperatures, and it's centered over Hudson Bay and areas to the east, which is an ideal setup to get cold air into the Carolinas. So perfect setup. So our winter weather forecasting rules, now we're in day 3 to 5. The timing and storm type are becoming a little bit more clear. I wish they were crystal clear, but we're kind of on the fringe of this. I think it's more going to be in that 3 to 4 day range where we'll get to tell you more, and no totals to talk about. But in full transparency, here's where the trends stand now. I will update these every day. The temperatures are trending colder, and what I mean by that, surface temperatures are trending colder. Above our heads, there's still some questions, and that's why there's an icy mix. The other thing that's crazy, the moisture content, really high. That's trending up. If this was rain, we're probably talking several inches of rain. So we don't normally see that much moisture in a winter setup. So that means the type of winter weather is a mix right now, and it's an icy mix at that. I'm going to go out about 70 hours here on our futurecast. You see see all those fronts? I'm going to stop that. I went too quick there. Look at those fronts. I mean, you've got 3 Arctic fronts pushing in cold air. 1, 2, 3. That's why there's tons of cold air. Then you see the system trying to develop over Texas, the southern plains. That's the beginning of our system that'll be heading our way. And speaking of that, this is a widespread event. From a travel standpoint, I've been bombarded with so many questions today of travel and airlines and the typical stuff, but it's been overwhelming today, and I've been kind of telling everyone the same thing. I don't think it really matters about our local weather. When you have a storm this big, it's going to affect air travel, because think of all the airplanes, let's say in Atlanta, Dallas, Memphis, Charlotte, all the way up to the nation's capital. Those airports are all impacted. You're going to be impacted, even if you're not in the snowy area. But for us, you see that light blue area? That's a 70 to 90% chance of winter weather. And what do we mean by that? A 1/4 inch liquid equivalent. And that means a 1/4 inch of ice, which is enough to cause power outages, or 2.5 inches of snow or sleet accumulation. That is significant, okay? 3.1 is our average snowfall. So that's essentially our average snowfall in one event. And you can see to the south, even in the blue area, which almost to Columbia, is 50 to 70%. So yeah, when's the last time I've been that confident? It's been a while. You have to look back. And speaking of that Arctic air, look at the waves of it. It's not one, as I mentioned, 2, 3, 4 waves of Arctic air just getting pushed down all the way through next week. So let's get into scenarios. I'll break this down a little bit with Tim as well. Track number 1, snow lovers, everybody who wants just snow, this is probably the best track for you, but there's even some ice and probably sleet. But this is a suppressed track, meaning the Arctic air gets really far south and we're in the fluffy light snow. And this would actually reduce totals, by the way, because it pushes the moisture down south as well. The track that we're seeing the most in the guidance, and I actually would, if I were to forecast it right now, would be this one, track number 2. Snow first, maybe a little bit of rain, then changing to sleet, and then changing to all freezing rain. So that creates the glacier surface. And what do I mean by that? Is you get some snow or sleet on the ground, you dump some water on it, and then it all freezes like a solid brick of ice. And then the worst case scenario, which is what we don't want to see, kind of the storm pushes further north, pulling warmer air, not the surface, but in the mid and upper levels, really the mid levels and low levels, I should say, not upper levels because it's cold aloft, but like 5 to 10,000 feet range. It creates liquid water falling from the sky into air temperatures that are in the teens and 20s. So that's a crippling ice storm for most of the area. So from impact standpoint right now, our moderate impacts for snow and sleet, just because we don't know the amounts, but the biggest impact is travel. Icy roads, they will be completely covered and likely for days as we go into the early part of the week, and power outages. So high risk of those. We might see these jump up to extreme in a few areas. And just to give some perspective, 1/10 of an inch ice, going to cause some slick spots. 1/4 inch, that's where you have issues. That's when you start to see power outage issues. You get to a 1/2 inch or above, that's crippling. And honestly, the forecast is pointing to not only accumulating snows, but crippling ice on top of it, which is the worst case scenario for many of us, and something we haven't seen since a decade ago plus. Why is this such a big deal? Typical snowstorm around here, melts the next day. Next day it thaws. We get black ice at night, right? That's what we worry about. This might never get to the black ice scenario because it never thaws, because temperatures stay below freezing from Saturday at some point to maybe Tuesday. So in the morning lows, if there's snow and ice on the ground too, that could make these temperatures even colder, because at night we could be in single digits and teens, which would really freeze this stuff up. And just to give you some perspective, there's a look at the amount of moisture. That's over 2 inches of precipitation. Real quick look at your Jerry Hunt Supercenter 7-day. I'll probably show this again with Tim. We want you to stay weather aware for the weekend for winter weather. Coming up, Tim and I will discuss all this for the next hour. Stick around. All right, welcome back. Tim Buckley joins me from WFMY, back from a little long weekend there. Hey, Tim, I got one question for you. I got a flight Saturday to... No, I'm just...
No, you don't.
Yeah. Yeah, so
No,
I'm guessing you've had that question a few times in the last 24 hours.
Yeah, someone just asked me, hey, I got a concert that I'm going to. It's a trombone choir in Winston-Salem Saturday afternoon. I said, you probably don't. You probably don't have that. It's looking like one of those weekends, and maybe into next week, where you're having cabin fever. You're stuck at home for a long while, potentially, right? What do you think?
Yeah, so, I mean, we'll get into the forecast here. We're on for an hour tonight, folks, so if you have questions, make sure you send them along. What's our number? 704-329? James,
3600. Yeah, I'll put it on
3600, yeah, I thought that was it.
Also, you were kidding about flights, but my parents do legitimately have a flight to the Carolinas on Sunday. And I was like, that's not going to happen.
Yeah. So Tim, we've got a lot to talk about. We can get into the guidance and all the meteorology, but from just a personal experience standpoint, you've been in the Carolinas a long time, not just in the Greensboro area, but out towards the coast. I've been here 23 years. We've talked a lot about winter events in the last couple of years, and one of the things we always talk about, Tim, is we're always lacking one of those ingredients, right? There's no cold air, there's no moisture. Maybe talk a little about it, because I've been talking a lot about this. For me personally, it's been a decade plus since I've seen this type of setup where we've got tons of cold air and we've got a ton of moisture. It's just a matter of where those two meet up. And it's kind of rare that we have both ingredients in such great supply for a winter storm.
It's a good question, and it's a good point, especially at this stage in the game, is to ask, what can go wrong? Are you missing something? Every winter threat we've tracked for the last few years usually has been lacking in one component, whether it be moisture or not enough cold air, or maybe not enough cold air at all the levels, all those things. This one isn't missing anything, like you said. And I'm not sure, I think I've seen some people floating around that, they've never seen a storm like this
Yeah.
Every storm is unique. I don't know if I'd be willing to go that far as to say we've never seen a storm quite like this necessarily, but it has been a long time.
Yeah.
And it does seem unique to me in the availability of the moisture and
Yeah.
maybe the length and the duration of the storm. And that's pretty concerning to me. I mean, this thing could be getting going, and we don't know yet for sure when it starts, but it could be starting Saturday morning, or it could wait until Saturday afternoon. But this thing keeps going even into like Sunday evening and
Yeah.
a little into the overnight. So that's not just a one-day storm, that's a two-day storm.
Yeah.
And so if you had to pin me down and say, does this remind me of any in my Piedmont tenure, which only goes back 12 years, I would probably offer up the 2014 one. That was a wet, impactful, snow plus ice, whole state shut down kind of a storm.
Yeah, and it's funny. Tonight I was, because I think even among people at our own station, Tim, who haven't been here very long, they haven't experienced a major winter storm. I had to go back and look for Charlotte. When was our last significant winter storm? So I went back and looked. Our last 3 inches or higher snowstorm was January of 2018. And I think this is the storm you're thinking about. Our last 4-inch plus total was back in 2014 in February, 4.6 inches. And our last significant ice storm was 2015-16. So it's been a while, and there's a lot of folks in our area that probably weren't even here for any of these events. And there's a whole bunch of others that just completely forget about them because it's been so long. In fact, 2 of the last 5 years were the first 2 snowless winters on record in Charlotte. So a lot of folks who are newbies are like, man, it doesn't snow or ice here, so what are you talking about? And I think that leads to also my concerns, because I think people aren't taking this very seriously.
Well, it's always hard to imagine something that you haven't experienced before. And so, like you gave the example, if you think you move to a climate and you experience it over a period of years and you're like, well, we don't ever really get that bad for winter weather. It does. It does get bad sometimes. And when it does, it really, it counts. I mean, this type of storm that we're dealing with this weekend is not just going to be a bad storm by North Carolina standards. It would be a bad storm by anybody's standards. If you're talking about a lot of snow, a lot of sleet, maybe an ice threat, all of those things are big problems for every part of the country. So I have that feeling that you don't get too often. It just feels like one of those where this is going to be a big part of our lives for a while, even into the middle and end of next week potentially.
Yeah, and so that's a good point. And one of the things I made today about this storm, and we just talked about it, kind of rare to see the ingredients all in place and in such copious amounts of cold air and moisture. The other part, which you've alluded to, and I've mentioned a lot, our typical winter storms, even some of our big ones, Tim, you're right, the next day the sun comes up, it might be cold, but we start melting it, and in a couple days it's above freezing, and people are like, oh, I can't believe it snowed 3 days ago. Well, this one, this falls, Tim, and I think for Charlotte, we might be below freezing for 3 days before we see 32 or higher. So whatever falls, whether it's ice, sleet, snow, it's not going to be melting for a while. This could be a long-lasting impact. We're not going to talk about a refreeze of black ice every day because it's never going to get to the point where it melts to refreeze. It's probably just going to stay ice the entire time. And I think that's the other odd thing about this setup, such cold air behind this system.
Such cold air. And one of the, probably the worst question I have right now, or maybe the most concerning, is let's say you're in one of those areas that gets a lot of ice. That's probably the biggest power outage risk.
Yeah.
Well, what if you don't have power and then it gets down to 10 degrees next week, and then the next day it's down to 12 degrees? These are real human impacts that you're going to have to consider. And what if you can't get out because the roads are just total mess? I mean, you couldn't even get out if you wanted to. So those are some things that you kind of need to plan on and need to consider at this point. And so our job is going to be to kind of narrow down the areas that have the bigger power outage risk and the ice risk versus the snow risk, which at this point I'm tending to kind of think, Brad, I kind of stole your map a little bit. That scenario 1 that you have, looks like farther south with the ice might be more likely. But we still don't really know. There's going to be some shifts as we get closer. But those are the details that are going to matter a lot to impacts for sure.
Yeah, so I've been showing those scenarios, and ironically, none of my scenarios have rain, Tim, which is another oddity because
right,
because it's so cold at the surface. It's like even if the warm air gets up here and it's not at the surface, it would be above our heads. That's why I told someone today. I was joking.
Yes.
They were like, "Hey, it's going to be 45 in the rain." I said, "Well, this is a rare occasion where rain isn't really an option. I think nothing is more of an option than rain, to be honest with you."
I agree. I don't think we're in line. There are a couple ways you can escape a winter storm. Number one is to be dry. Number two is to be just rain. I don't really see either of those as on the table right now for the Carolinas. In fact, it really could be a coast-to-coast, well, not coast-to-coast, but just a whole state storm. It could be a whole state storm, even all the way into eastern North Carolina and all the way to the coastal areas as well. But this time, we're going to get more than they do. There's not any debate about that at this point, not like last year.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about your area. I think I obviously have not put out a snowfall or ice map yet because it's Tuesday. I might be inclined to put one out late tomorrow, but I really think Thursday would be the more prudent time to do that. But I do kind of have a vision of what could fall. And Tim, one of the things I think for the Charlotte area, the southern Piedmont in our area, and I think it's going to be what I call a glacier surface, where I think it could be snow or sleet with freezing rain on top, which would refreeze into this sheet of ice that is impossible to move. That's kind of my travel nightmare issue. But up your way, what are you more thinking about the mixture, the precipitation types, at least at this stage?
Yeah, I mean, kind of the way it's tracking right now, and probably the million-dollar question, as always, is how much sleet mixes in with the snow. If you're able to keep it mostly snow the whole time, well, you sure can get a foot. There's nothing stopping you this time around. In fact, if it stays snow the whole time, you probably will get a foot of snow.
Yeah,
which is a little crazy because in Greensboro, we've only actually gotten a foot of snow 3 times on record. But we did it in 2018, and that's because we didn't have a lick of sleet. It was all snow the whole time. And you work out the liquid with that. You need about 1 inch to 1.25 inches of water to make that happen. Well, we could have 1.5 inches to 2 inches this time if the models are to be believed. So anyway, I pulled this not because I believe any of these numbers, but these are just what we're looking at behind the scenes, what Brad's looking at, what I'm looking at. And these are for Greensboro, so they're not for Charlotte. But these are a variety of computer models all trying to answer the same question. If you look at this, you say, well, there's a virtual certainty that we would get 1 inch of snow, right? That seems silly, but that's still a good piece of information. And a very good chance that you might see around 6 inches or more or less. That's at the 50-50 spot. Now, these don't include sleet involving in their predictions. And so usually that sleet line is a little farther north than I'm expecting 5 days away. But this time could be different. It could be, maybe farther south. We don't know. I'm just saying usually it's farther north than I expect. So I would say, you should maybe think of over 3 inches as a pretty good bet. And the ceiling is very high. Up to a foot cannot be ruled out if you're able to keep the sleet away, and the freezing rain goes without saying. The reason the Canadian model is way lower is that one has a whole lot more sleet, and it has some more freezing rain as well.
Yeah, but those are good numbers, because I think the great thing about those kind of numbers, it kind of shows you what we call the ensemble approach, right? Looking at here's all the possibilities, not a single number, and you kind of see the weight towards there's something that's going to fall. It's I think that's the one thing why I talked about this so early, and I'm sure you talked about it earlier than you ever have. It's the probability of some wintry weather is about as high as I've ever seen it this far out. And one of my favorite graphics, which I've been trying to get into our system, Tim, is this new product that the Weather Prediction Center is using, is the probabilities of moderate impacts. And James, you bring up my laptop here. And I know it might be hard to see your county, but I have all of the Carolinas on here. So what I turned on here is basically a 24-hour period from 7 p.m. Saturday to 7 p.m. Sunday of you seeing moderate impacts. And what are moderate impacts? Well, I can tell you exactly. This describes them as expect disruptions to daily life. hazardous driving conditions, use extra caution while driving, closures and disruptions to infrastructure may occur. So this is like things shutting down, being closed, canceled flights, you not being able to go anywhere. And when you look at these probabilities, Tim, all that red is between 60 and 90% chances of that happening, which is just crazy to think that we're on Tuesday and this is for Saturday into Sunday, but that's how confident we are in this happening. So this is fairly significant. And as you mentioned, Tim, look at that. All of the Carolinas have some type of impacts. There's not one area that seems to escape this. The other thing I love about this product, it does take into account locality. So an inch of snow in Georgia is different than an inch of snow in Minnesota. So they take into account. So for our area, this is a high, moderate impact event, and it's going to last a while. I'm just going to move the cursor here and show you this goes through Sunday. And as Tim mentioned, even through this is Monday morning, there's still impacts. We go into Monday afternoon, and it really doesn't clear out until like Tuesday, mainly because there could be some lingering moisture. So it's wild to think that's the case here, Tim, but I really like that graphic because it really shows, like, from an impact standpoint, we get caught up in totals. Everybody loves their smartphone app telling them all this snow's going to fall. We can post all these great colorful maps online. But honestly, at the end of the day is how this is going to impact your life. And when I see disruptions to daily life and infrastructure, that's a red flag that said this is a big deal.
I think it's going to be one of those for sure, and it's going to be difficult to move the snow around. You're either going to have a whole lot of it, or it's going to be a little less but heavier. Right? It might either be light and fluffy and really deep, or you've got a little bit more compacted and there's a whole bunch of heavy sleet in there. So it's going to be heavy for you to move around. It's going to be hard to melt, and it's just not going to melt for a little while. So we've seen these storms in the past. These are the ones where the school districts close the whole week.
Yep.
And I'm not guaranteeing that's going to happen, but if you gave me the bet, I'd take the bet right now that they're probably not having school all the next week in parts of the area, if not the whole. I'm just saying, that's like, these things happen for lesser storms than this. And if there's any ice on roads, they close the school. And there's going to be ice on roads for several days next week.
Yeah, and because of the temperatures, Tim, this is not an easy removal situation. Plows and salt. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that has to literally sometimes be chiseled away or just melt in the sun. It's very, very difficult. We do have some video from Buffalo that we're going to show you. Not that we're expecting this in Charlotte, but we will talk a little bit about the same Arctic air mass, Tim, that we're watching has been moving over the Great Lakes and has been absolutely dumping snow. And this is near Buffalo, but up towards your old hometown there in the Tug Hill Plateau. Talk a little bit about some of the snow they saw this week, because I saw a crazy video from up there again. And what is that, like the second or third time this season they have just been absolutely clobbered?
Well, this is great video because this shows you how they get rid of snow up there, by the way.
Oh, they're so good at it.
And they do exactly what you're seeing. They've got, all sorts of equipment. You just put an attachment on a truck and you load it into a dump truck. And if they didn't do that, you could never park cars downtown for a couple months out of the year. Also, those are good road conditions. Those aren't bad. If you can see the darkness of the pavement, that's a great road condition. And what might not make sense to us Carolinians, and this might be something that factors in this weekend, when it's really, really cold outside, like temperatures in the low 20s or something, you actually have better traction on the snow than when it's warmer. So when it's super cold, you actually get some compacting and a little traction that goes along with that. That might be the case for a little bit during the event this week until you start to mix in and warm up a little bit. But there's a nice live shot from downtown Buffalo. That's the City Hall building. And it's still snowing. So it's just part of life up there that you get these big lake effect systems. But I do know they had some big numbers this week. And, one thing that's fun about upstate New York is they have a competition. They call it the Golden Snowball. Ooh. And the Golden Snowball is a race between Buffalo, Rochester, Albany, and Syracuse. And what they're doing is they try to see who wins for the most snow throughout the year. And I'll look up the current standings to see who's ahead. But I know Syracuse is far and away in the lead right now. They have 93 inches so far this season. Buffalo has 44. Rochester has 57.
Wow.
And then Albany has 32. So that's kind of a little fun little horse race that they have going on. But it's been a while since Cuse won. Buffalo has been in the lead for a while. So
Yeah.
we're not expecting that much here.
No.
But 10 inches or so?
Maybe.
Possible.
All right, we got to take a break. We're going to come back and talk more snow, ice, and a wintry mess. We're taking your question as well, so make sure you send those questions in. I can spit it out. We're going to be coming back here after the break, so stick around. All right, welcome back. We're going to do another half hour tonight, and we'll be doing this all this week, Tim and I, starting at 6:30, going to 7:30, and obviously all the talk will be about the winter event. And Tim, you didn't hear us, but I was talking to James earlier. I'm kind of thinking this week we probably shouldn't even do local 10 minutes. We should just all dive into this thing together from the beginning, because we're basically going to be talking about the same thing, and it might be better. So I'm just going to throw that out there live on our stream, because I think we just go right into it instead of doing 10 minutes local. What do you think?
Yeah, well, I mean, we certainly could. There's still some differences between, this side of 85 versus that side of 85, but everybody's getting a storm this time. It's not like you're going to miss out like usual. So
yeah,
we could do that.
The great thing is we can break down each area, because there's we kind of go down almost Columbia and we kind of go up towards you, so it's kind of nice crossover. We can, and you're right, across our area, basically your farthest northern counties and my farthest southern counties, it will be pretty dramatic. I think everybody gets something, but somebody's going to get a whole lot of ice and somebody's going to get a whole lot of snow within that range. We just don't know where that is right now, and that's the concern. I mean, I think I'm rooting for snow, Tim. I mean, as you mentioned, this could be a high-end snow event, but we could probably deal with a foot of snow a whole lot better than we could a half an inch, or in some cases 3/4 of an inch ice you're seeing in some of the guidance. That would be devastating for some of these areas. Let's talk a little bit about that, because ice around here, we haven't had an ice storm in a long time. I went back and looked ice storm reports from Mecklenburg County, and I said it was 2015-16, but honestly, you're probably going to go back 20 years before you see a real significant ice storm, that 2002 storm, which caused more damage than Hugo. And when I first got to the Carolinas, one of the things you heard a lot about was, because of cold air damming, that we used to be the ice storm capital of America because of the cold air damming. We really haven't had a big ice storm in a while, but Talk a little bit about, Tim, about how devastating these storms can be in our area, especially for power lines when you get significant icing.
They really can, and it's so much more than snow. And not to keep bringing this up, but we were just talking about buffalo snow and all this kind of stuff. They don't lose power up there all that often when it's snowing. It's not because their power grid is better. It's just snow doesn't in itself create power outages. Really wet or heavy snow can, but moreover, it's usually when it's mixed with ice, and so. For us, Brad, our last big storm for snow, it was 2018. We got 13 inches. I don't recall there being too many power outage problems. And that was primarily because we didn't mix that much. But freezing rain can be a big issue. I think for us, the last really bad one was March of 2014. It was a month after that big winter storm that we had with the snow and the ice. And it honestly caught us a little bit by surprise. We got like half an inch of ice out there, and all of a sudden a couple 100,000 people without power. But those type of events, they're really scary. Ice storms are way scarier than snowstorms for a variety of reasons. Trees can fall on your house. It's super dangerous just driving around the area. It's already dangerous to drive out there. But if it's cold enough to get that freezing rain to stick to the bridges or the roads, no, it's hard to do. But if you can do it, I mean, there's just no way you can drive on it. You can't. It just makes it impossible. You remember that Texas storm they had with all that freezing rain, Brad?
Oh, yes.
Footage like that with all those tractor trailers on all those elevated Dallas highways. I mean, just apocalyptic. I'm not saying we're going to have that, but somebody in the Carolinas could get a lot of ice out of this thing. I tend to think it's south of my area. That's just the way it looks right now. But what's your gut telling you?
I mean, it could be close to Charlotte, but I'm thinking South Carolina counties. Those are the counties we're going to be watching between probably Charlotte and Columbia. Could have significant ice. And one of the things, the threshold we normally use is like a quarter inch of ice is usually the problematic ice accumulation. And a half an inch of ice on a power line can add 500 pounds of weight between poles. So think about a string of lines. So that's a lot of weight. And we often think that ice forms evenly, but when ice is dripping off power lines or even branches, it kind of forms like an odd shape, like a teardrop, because some of it's melting, some of it's refreezing. So you get weird shapes on those power lines, and if there's any wind, you don't need much. It could cause them to shake and fall as well. One of the questions we got was about the type of snow, if it were snow, and we don't talk about this a lot around here, but snowfall ratios, right? Is it a fluffy snow? Is it a wet snow? I was out west in Utah, and when I was telling my son, Utah's known for like fluffy snow because it's like 50, 60, 80 to 1 liquid to snowfall ratio, so it's very airy. This type of setup, Tim, is kind of interesting because even though there's a lot of moisture aloft, I'm looking at some of the snowfall ratios forecast from Open Snow, which is a great product for skiers, but it's looking at, even though a mix is there, it's showing like a fluffy snow if it is snow because it's like 15, 16 to 1 ratios initially, which is kind of crazy to think for the Carolinas. What are your thoughts about the type of snow? Because that was one of our text questions. Would it be a wet, heavy snow or a fluffy snow if it were to happen?
Yeah, it's strange because we're talking about, are we going to mix precipitation or not? So you would think it would be a wet snow, but I tend not to think that. I think the moisture, with it being so cold, you would have higher, what we call the snow ratio, but we would have more fluff factor than usual. And there's good and bad things to that. It can be easier to move around, at least initially. And boy, oh boy, do I recommend getting out there and going ahead and moving that snow as quickly as you can.
Yes.
Because you don't want to wait with a system like this. It becomes a glacier much more quickly than you might expect. So probably with a long duration one like this, you're going to want to get out there a couple times on Saturday, a couple times on Sunday, if you can stomach it. Hey, you might be bored enough to go do that as well. But yeah, I think a fluffy snow is probably likely, rather than a heavy wet one. And to that point, we might be able to manage, even if you get a foot of snow or more. You could probably manage without doing too many power outages, at least hopefully.
Yeah, because that tends to not stick to the power lines or the tree branches, which can cause weight. But the other great thing about a fluffy snow is you can use the southern snow blower, which is a leaf blower. You can bring that out and blow the snow away. So yeah, that would help you out. And if you do it soon before it refreezes, that's the best time to do it. Good call there. One of the other questions we got, and I just was glancing at them real quickly, was about, and this is for you, Tim. This is Renee up in Greensboro. If this were to be strictly ice, no snow whatsoever, what does several inches of ice look like as far as that liquid precipitation? I think that's what she's asking. Are we? What is the expectation? Is it several inches of ice like it is snow? She's basically asking if it were ice, how much are you talking about? Because I think that's something we talk about, Tim. Like I mentioned this today. It's weird. Like a tenth of an inch of ice is a tenth of an inch of liquid, but a tenth of an inch of liquid could be an inch, inch and a half of snow. So the amounts, that's why the mixing is so important to what you get, because sleet is solid water. So you get a half an inch of sleet, that's a half an inch of liquid water. So that's what makes our forecast hard. So when it's just all ice, that's where the totals get kind of weird, right?
Usually when we're making a winter forecast, if you want to do it the old way and the right way, you're going to figure out how much water you have to work with. We call that QPF, folks, but it's the amount of water. So how much water are you able to freeze? And then you need to break it down further. So like Brad was saying, how much of it falls as snow? That's going to add up and stack up pretty tall, about 10 times as tall as an inch of water would. If it's sleet, that's a lot more compact, usually more like 2 to 1 or 3 to 1.
Yeah.
So that's a lot less. And that's why when you get sleet involved in a snowstorm, your snow goes from this to this. There's weight factor in, but also that sleet, it is not fluffy. Snow is mostly air when it's standing up. It's kind of like, it has all these crystals. That's literally what it is. But sleet is solid water. Freezing rain, I always thought it was 1-to-1, Brad. Like, if I have an inch of water, I'm going to get an inch of ice on the deck or on the tree. Yeah. But, I actually didn't learn this until a couple of years ago, but there's a runoff factor, and there's, how can you accrete this and all these things that go into it. So if you want to get into the weeds, an inch of water, if you got that falling all as freezing rain, it would probably be about 3/4 of an inch of ice or 7/10 of an inch of ice, something like that.
Yeah.
But boy, all you need is 1/4 of an inch or 1/3 of an inch to cause huge problems. So we don't want to see that. I don't think that's super likely in Greensboro to get more than 1/4 of an inch of ice as of right now, but that could change. And so that's part of the preparation that we're going through at this time.
Yeah, it's such a good point. You would think it's 1-to-1 for rain and to ice when freezing rain, but we use a thing called the FRAM, which is a great acronym because it's exactly what you think, the freezing rain allowing model, right? It accounts for runoff, evaporation, because if it's raining real heavily, it doesn't all stick to the branch. Some of it's going to fall to the ground and run off. It's just like if you took your hose out this morning and sprayed your patio. Yeah, you'd get a bunch of ice, but a lot of that water would just run off too. It wouldn't all just freeze instantly. So it does make it more difficult. And when you're higher up, when you have tree branches and stuff that are surrounded by air, it's easier to freeze rain up there than it is down at the ground because a lot of that will just run down the drain and get into there. So freezing on the roads is a little bit different than freezing on the tree branches. I've seen events, Tim, and I'm sure you have, where we've had freezing rain here and the roads are just wet, but there's ice in all the trees and power lines because it's freezing up there, but not on the road surface. I don't expect that this go around, but that does happen in some of our ice events.
For sure. Yeah, it's a lot of the marginal ones where, you might be 30 or 31 or 29 or something. That's usually a big factor. But nice to see we're getting a lot of questions coming in here to the chat. Seems like someone's asking, do they think schools will be closed most of next week in Catawba County? We kind of just answered
Tim guaranteed that already. I just want you to know that.
Call your superintendent. Tell him Tim said so.
But Tim Buckley said.
Yeah. Someone's mentioning the 2000 storm. It wouldn't be a Carolina storm if we didn't compare it.
The Carolina Crusher.
Asked about. This usually comes up when we're forecasting flurries
Yes.
or a dusting, because sometime back then, Brad wasn't here, I wasn't here. Someone said flurries, and that's what's associated with it every time, and it got to be 2 feet. But questioning how it compares, for a lot of people, that is the biggest snow ever, right? And could this compare? There's enough moisture available that it could compare in some areas, but probably different areas. I think it would be more north and west and not so much central.
Yeah, that 2000 event, that gets brought up all the time, Tim, and I'm always cracked up because people are like, I remember the time there were flurries and we got 2 feet of snow or whatever. And I'm like, man, that seems weird because, you know, I've never seen an event, at least personally, where I'll bring up the Carolina Crusher. So I got it on Twitter here. Jeb can bring it up. I actually tweeted about this like 3 years ago when this date came up. But this is the Carolina Crusher from around Charlotte up to the Greensboro, Burlington. I mean, really the central part of the state, Tim. There was like 2 feet of snow. And a lot of folks thought that this was going to be a weak event. But when I look at the satellite image, I don't know how that goes. That looks like flurries. If I saw that thing, I'm not forecasting flurries, but that's what it looked like on the satellite imagery. So, I'm going to have to. I have to look back. It's always weird. Sometimes when people said, hey, this was under forecast, it's not that it was under forecast. It might have been like this event, which I'm worried about. People weren't taking it seriously or paying attention to the forecast because, let's be honest, if you didn't hear anything, it's all new to you. So with an event like this, you often wonder, I want to go back and look at what the official forecast was versus maybe what somebody on TV said, or back then, you know, a lot of pre-social media, maybe people just weren't paying attention and it caught them off guard.
Yeah, that's a legendary one. I think it gets brought up so often because it was such a big miss, and you know, we're not tooting our horns or anything like that. Yeah. Of course, the forecast, there are still misses that happen. There aren't really big ones like that get missed anymore. That would be a pretty epic fail.
Well, and Tim, this is a great example.
This time around, yeah.
Well, I was going to say, this is a great example of why big storms don't get missed, because the signals right now on this are so strong. I mean, I would argue that oftentimes storms will underperform, we call it. I hate that term sometimes, but I've seen more storms produce less than we anticipate than more. That's seems like a pretty rare event. I do remember one, maybe the second year I was here. I was helping out the morning show, and I think we had a winter weather advisory for like an inch or two. And during our morning show, it just started snowing, and all of a sudden we went from a winter weather advisory to a winter storm warning to like 8 inches of snow on the ground. That happens, but there was still a couple inches of snow in the forecast. It wasn't like flurries. So that may be the one time I remember that happening. But to see 2 feet of snow and someone say flurry, that seems kind of weird, especially when I look at the satellite image and I'm like, I think you could have seen that coming if you looked at the satellite image.
Yeah. You would hope so anyway. We weren't there. We don't know all the nitty-gritty, but I've heard it from many. It was a tough forecast. So hopefully we've improved since then. Brett, you posted a great graphic earlier, and I feel like this could be a good thing to talk about. Yeah. Just things that people should have around the house and preparations that they should be thinking about. We say, well, prepare for a winter storm, and people don't necessarily know what that means, especially if you haven't lived here a while. Things like food and water, heat sources, the flashlights, the batteries, all of those are really good things to kind of consider. I've heard it's already a madhouse out there at the stores and that sort of thing, but you've really got to have it, and you've got to kind of be ready for anything. And these are good things to think in mind. I thought especially the medications one, and like making sure, hey, if you have a prescription you got to pick up this weekend, you might want to see if you can get it filled a little early. Those are all good things to kind of think about going into next week.
Yeah, and you know, we joke a lot about bread and milk around here, and that meme goes around, it seems like every snowstorm. But Tim, the honest part is like you got to kind of plan to be stuck at home for a couple days. So think about stuff you would normally go out and get, and don't count on DoorDash or Instacart helping you out here, because those people probably aren't going to be able to do much for you either. But I do think it's important to have non-perishable food, because if the power power does go out, you can always use the outside as a refrigerator. We did that. That's a Midwestern and Northeastern thing. You just throw your food out on the back porch or open a cooler and leave it out there. But you need to have some food that could last a couple days. Water, backup heat source. This to me is probably the biggest thing because we're in the Southeast. I'm lucky I have gas heat, Tim, but most people here have electric. They have heat pumps, right? Heat pumps don't work when there's no power. And one of the biggest dangers in these events when the power goes out, people use alternative sources of heating. They bring a propane or kerosene heater. Unfortunately, when I was here early on, we had a bunch of people bring barbecue grills and open their oven and do all these weird things to heat their house, which is really, really dangerous. So make sure you have safe sources of heating in your house. And because of that, make sure your smoke detector and your carbon monoxide detectors are working well, because there's a high risk of fire because of those heating sources, but also the dry Arctic air, as we've alluded to before, causes fires and house fires to be much more problematic during the wintertime. And then think about firefighters trying to get to your house to fight a fire. That's a whole nother issue that we have to deal with in these situations as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and something we're going to have to figure out once the storm is ending, or, how cold is it going to be for how long? Power outages will get fixed. I mean, those things will come around, and hopefully not too many of them. But if you're without power, that's a real concern when you have Arctic temperatures moving in. So be thinking about if you want to stay with family as an option, or any sort of people that might have better options than you. This is going to be one of those storms that you really ride out. So find someplace comfy, find someplace where you're in a good spot with people who can help you and that sort of thing. It might not be a bad idea, because if you're shuttered in all weekend and that kind of leads into Monday, Tuesday of next week, that's kind of a long haul.
Yes, some of the questions we're getting, Tim, and I'm looking in our chat here, is a lot of questions about ice, right? Are we seeing, the potential for ice, and how big is it? And I think that, and I won't speak for you, but I think that's my biggest concern, and probably why I was going a little harder on this early, was this ice threat. I don't know who's going to get that big ice storm, but if you were to ask me right now, I think somebody in the Carolinas, possibly South Carolina, but it could be parts of North Carolina, there's definitely that potential for a crippling ice storm, like three-quarter inch ice, certainly in the cards, especially when you look at what you just called QPF. I posted a graphic today that blew my mind, even looking at, Arctic air with 2 to 4 inches of QPF. I mean, that's insane, right? Now, will that all be winter precip? Probably not. But even if you cut that in half, Tim, that's a lot of moisture.
Yeah, and so the potential is really high. And, these are seasoned Carolina questions to ask about a winter storm when you're much more worried about the ice and less so about the snow. That's someone who's been around a while, because those are the ones that have had the biggest impacts to the power grid and transportation, all these kind of things. Again, if you're in the Greensboro area, I saw Lexington mention these areas. I'm not as concerned about freezing rain right now. I think if we're mixing in with the snow, it's probably more sleet than freezing rain. But consider, we're 5 days away. It could shift. I mean, if the whole thing shifts north, we could be talking differently. But considering how strong the high pressure is, Brad, I do tend to think if this shifts any way, farther south might be more preferred than farther north. That's just kind of my thought with that 1050 Arctic high or something out there. It might be one that shifts farther south, and you might not get that northwest trend like we tend to see.
Yeah, and that's so true. That's a suppressed, track where it pushes it south. And we saw this last year with the big Gulf Coast up the East Coast kind of storm track where Pensacola got like 8 inches or 10 inches or whatever, New Orleans. The Arctic air pushed so far south that the storm track was literally along the Gulf Coast. Now, I don't think it'll get pushed that far south, but you're right. I think if we see a push to the south, that would probably be more of what we're going to see. That's why I think the number one confidence I have, Tim, is the cold air at the surface. I just think that I've never seen this much cold air available. I really don't think we'll be lacking cold air at the surface. I just think it's the warm nose, and as you mentioned, how far south or north that track is for that warm nose, because that's the only thing that changes this is the warm air loft just above our heads, not near the surface.
And freezing rain at if I'm 20 degrees in Greensboro or something like that, Freezing rain is not that common at 20 degrees. That's a lot more often a sleet situation than a freezing rain one. So just kind of my 2 cents. I haven't seen the warm noses be super huge on the soundings up here just yet, but we'll be watching. Ice is definitely a big concern with the system overall. It's just narrowing down that corridor. Probably not have a good idea on it until Thursday.
Yeah, and I think those are those fine-tuned things. We did this yesterday when I was on, and maybe I'll try to do it again. One of the interesting things I like doing with some of our modeling is kind of showing people like small variations, and I'm going to try to pull this up. But yesterday, one of the things I did was I took our modeling, Tim, and I took the what we call the grid adjust, and I just moved the model 50 miles one way or the other, and it's pretty stunning.
Sure.
So I'm going to pause this right here, and in full transparency, this is basically Sunday 2 p.m. from one model. It's the European model. And so what I'll do is we'll do a grid adjust. I got to turn it on because it's not working. What I like to do is show how subtle changes in this guidance can have a huge impact on the outcome, because I'm going to take our grid adjust and we're going to take both of these products here. I'm going to take the distance. And so the first thing I'm going to do is shift it north 50 miles, which isn't very much, right? We're not that far out.
Nope.
So I'll shift it 50 miles. And you could see mostly all ice for us, Tim. It doesn't, it's all pink. That's probably sleet and ice. But if we go the other direction, shift it 50 miles south, I went 500. We don't want to go that far. You can see how the snow line gets closer to you and it pushes the ice all the way down to Charleston. So subtle changes like that can have huge, huge differences on the forecast. And when you think about a 50-mile difference, that's not a big deal. As I mentioned yesterday, that doesn't have to happen all at once. If you just change it 10 miles a day for the next 5 days, that net change is 50 miles. So small changes multiplied by multiple days can be big differences. But as you notice, too, in that, Tim, in both of those scenarios, it was still a winter storm. There wasn't one where all of a sudden it was rain or it was out of here.
Yes.
And I could even play with this more and say, hey, let's change it 100 miles. And you're probably still going to have winter weather. There's not a whole lot of scenarios. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to grab the grid adjust and I'll play with it. I'll move it. I'll bring the rain all the way to Charlotte, and I'll ask you how far that shift has to be. Guess how many miles that is?
Was that like 200 miles or something?
Yep, 200-mile difference, okay? Now, if I shift it the other way, 200 miles, it's all snow. So that's a huge shift. So that goes to show you, even a dramatic change in every instance there, it's mostly all winter weather. So, yeah, to get rain, and that barely got it to you, that's 200 miles right there. So that would be pretty dramatic, and we're not expecting that. That's what we're expecting right now, just from that piece of guidance. But yeah, that's our job. That's our job in a nutshell. Small changes that really, I used to have hair before I forecast here in the Carolinas. I joke all the time because the cold air damming. I mean, it's like 32.0 is ice, 32.1 is rain. And it's not just at the surface, it's at 4,000 feet, 5,000 feet. It's like all these variables that are just, normally make us go crazy. That's why in this case, Tim, a lot of those variables aren't as wild as they normally are, and why we're really confident in winter weather. We're just debating now whether it's snow, sleet, or ice.
We can answer all of those questions one side or the other side, and the advice we're going to give you is still going to be prepared to be stuck at home for a couple days.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yep.
I mean, that could be the whole thing, and you want to know the details, and we'll give them to you. But that's the main deal is you got to be prepared to be stuck at home a couple days because you can't get on the roads because they're too bad, and it's probably not going to melt that quickly. So there's the simple version, and then we'll do the more complicated version later. Don't you get this question a lot, Brad? People want to know what is the most so you'll show them the different models. And they'll say, well, which one is right usually? And I tell them, if the same one was right all the time, we wouldn't have questions about this.
Yeah.
Like this is more complicated than that. They're all wrong to
Yes.
a degree. They're all predicting the future. So if it was consistent, if this one was always wrong by this much and this one was always right by that much, we would have an easier job. It's not that way with it. And they can all be, one storm can have a winner and then the next one can have a different winner. That's just the way it works.
Yeah, we live in a very simplified society where they just want this is the thing we're using. I wish it was that easy. As Tim mentioned, I think of the models.
Yeah.
I probably look at about 10 to 15 models on a daily basis, and even within those models, if you count the ensembles, there's 30 and 50 members of some of those models. There's a lot of data that we look at. And if you think about it at home, it's like having a tool chest. If you're going to build something, at one time you might use the screwdriver. Another time you might have to use the hammer. Another time you might have to use the crescent wrench. And in some cases you have to use all three, but there's not just one tool in that toolkit that solves all your problems. You got to use all of them at some point. And that's the way models are. They're tools. We got to use all of them at some point. And so there's not a simple answer. I can't just give you a hammer and go, hey, go build a house with just this one hammer. You're going to need more tools than that, and we need more than that to build a forecast.
For sure. Either way, all of those tools, all of those models, all pointing toward a big storm this weekend across the Carolinas. A mix of snow, some ice, some sleet. It's going to be something we track all week for you. So just buckle up and stay tuned.
Yeah, one more question I got a lot today, because I mentioned this earlier. We had a question about the 2002 ice storm. It's a memorable storm for me because I was in town for the interview for this job. And I was staying at a hotel here by the station, and I had power and was showering. I came over to the station, and it was like Lord of the Flies in here because nobody had power for 2 weeks. And they're like, can we shower at your hotel room? And that was a devastating storm. But someone asked, how does this compare? Well, it doesn't compare at all. I think all storms are different. But in 2002, that was the first week of December. It was a huge Arctic air mass, and there was tons of moisture. But, Tim, it was early December, and there were still leaves on the trees in a lot of locations because it's still that time of year. And that created a lot more surface area. So the tree damage was extensive. In fact, it caused more damage than Hugo in the Western Carolinas as far as power and tree damage because of that. And that also was an event where the roads were completely wet and fine. All the ice was in the trees, but you couldn't go anywhere because trees were blocking the road. So that might be the ice storm of ice storms for us, but I don't anticipate that because I do think there'll be snow and sleet mixed in. As much as I want to say that it's not all snow, I don't think it's all going to be ice either. I think there's going to be a mix in there.